Hey guys, it's Lane here with Hobbies Man once again, and today we're going to be looking at a book. So we're going to be looking at Robert E. Howard's creator of Conan, Kull, Exile of Atlantis. This is a book that collects all of the short stories relating to Kull that we know that Robert Jordan wrote. So there's some channels out there that can tell you a little bit more about these editions, specifically Michael K. Vaughn, I think is his name. I know him. I'm pretty sure his name is Michael Vaughn, but I can't remember the name of his channel. I'll leave it up on the iCard above, and I'll link it down below. But he does a lot of videos. He has the Robert E. Howard Show, and he mentions this edition, the Del Rey edition of the Robert E. Howard collection, a lot. And and I found this one day, I think about a year ago at this point, and I finally got around to reading it. I didn't read the whole thing because I actually don't like short stories, but I wanted to read the Robert E. Howard stuff because I think it's so important to the fantasy that I like, and because there's some other, old school fantasy and science fiction writers that I like that are contemporaries or kind of like in the same vein as Robert E. Howard, like, Edgar Rice Burroughs. And so I want to read the other side of that, right? The other big guy that came from the pulps. And I want to kind of enjoy that, right? So even though I don't really like short stories and I find myself having a tough time, engaging with them and kind of finding myself enthralled by them, I managed to at least read the first third of this book, and I actually had a lot of fun with it. I really enjoy these stories. I think Robert E. Howard has a great way of writing. So we're going to be talking about the first story, which is an untitled, but also has another title. So the story is supposed to be untitled, but it was published at one point as The Exile of Atlantis. And so that is the title that it has. Then we're going to be looking at the Shadow Kingdom, then the Mirrors of Thuzun Thun, then this other story called Untitled. It doesn't have a title yet, or it never did. Although, it could have been called something relatively easy, like, The Rivers or something. And then The Cat and the Skull, which I think was probably the weirdest story. Oh, they were all kind of weird because there's a really interesting mix of like eldritch horror and epic heroic fantasy stuff, and there's also this kind of like philosophy that happens within the stories, and so they're all kind of odd, but really enjoyable. I mean, The Cat and the Skull was good, but I think it had like a little bit of weirdness at the end. So the story, or the book, actually starts with a few bits of front matter that talks about, what Kull is and how he's basically the template from which sprung Conan. But because he's also the template, he's also quite different from Conan in a few key ways. And one of the ways that he's different is that Kull actually has a group of characters that are around him thanks to the setting he's in. Because Kull is a king, he exists mostly in a throne room, and from there, his stories kind of stretch out into the world. And so we get this repetition of characters, like in a sitcom, right? Where you have a character and then you have the characters that exist in the setting, and the main character or the characters that are the main kind of group interact with the setting and then interact with the characters around that setting, right? So it's kind of like that. But then it's about, barbarians like killing each other, right? So overall, really cool stuff. I did really enjoy this. So I'm going to run down through a little kind of a synopsis of each story, and I'll tell you a little bit about my thoughts on each story. So The Exile of Atlantis starts with three men around a fire. It introduces us to Kull. It introduces us to Amra, who is Kull's friend, about the same age. And it introduces us to Gorna, who is an old man who happens to be kind of like a teacher to Kull in the way of their tribes. We learn about the Atlantean sea tribes, the people, the barbarians that live in this kind of I don't know if I can call it a jungle, but this kind of like area near the ocean. that is forested, and I do think it actually should be a jungle because there's like tigers and shit. So yeah, it should be some sort of jungle. And he apparently is adopted by them. He grew in the wilds. He spent a lot of time with these with these animals in the jungle, and then was found by this tribe and taken in by them. And he is kind of like them. He does look like them, so it's not that difficult to think that he'd be one of them. But his origins are kind of like nebulous, right? But then Kull and Gorna get into an argument. They talk about their mythology, and Kull is like, none of that makes sense because I actually lived with tigers, and that's not how they would interact, and that's not the law of nature. And so Gorna and Kull kind of get mad at each other over this kind of weird dogma. It also introduces us to Volusia, which is a kingdom across this kind of like small ocean that is kind of big and strong, and that harries the sea tribes for slaves. And we also learn about the Lemurians, who, as far as I understand it, are only described as pirates. So they're maybe seafaring, but I do think that because Lemuria and Atlantis are basically the same kind of thing, I think that Lemurians are just a different group of sea tribes that became pirates and now are antagonistic to the other tribes that live in this area that Kull lives in, right? So, yeah. And then we see that Kull is struggling with the dogma of his people and actually gets exiled after mercy killing this woman who was being kind of crucified to suffer over a rather unimportant thing, right? And so it's mostly due to their beliefs. And so Kull kills her in mercy and has to run away and is exiled from his tribe. And so Kull is no longer part of them, right? And so that's where that story ends. I really enjoyed that. I thought the introduction was great. I really enjoyed how it sets up Kull. It sets up how intelligent he is. And then it sets up the country or the people that he's from and the culture that he kind of follows, first and foremost. But also the fact that he kind of doesn't have the ability to kind of force himself to fit into the mold of society, whatever society that may be. So I like that. I think that's really, really good. In the Shadow Kingdom, it's many, many years later. Kull has somehow become the king of Volusia. I don't really know that we ever learn how it happens, but I'm sure it's mentioned later. And he's dealing with his advisors, specifically this god called Canu, who tells him to trust a man that he'll send later. And Canu is actually a Pict, which is a meaningful thing because Picts come across all of the things that Robert E. Howard writes up until Brian McMorran, I think, where he's the last Pictish guy. And Picts in this situation are a subservient kingdom to Volusia, more or less. And they function as guards and kind of a mercenary force for Volusia. And Kull doesn't really trust Canu, and they have like this like barbarian animosity is what he calls it. But Canu is an old man, and so he doesn't really pose a physical threat to Kull. But Kull is smart enough to know that this guy has like the ability to be a very big mental threat. And so he takes him seriously, even if he doesn't really like him. But then Kull goes alone to his room. He actually doesn't get to sleep. He paces around his room for, all of the hours of the night until this guy, Brule, shows up. And Brule is a Pict. He's the guy that Canu said he was sent. He shows him this kind of bracer that he has that looks like a dragon. And he shares a phrase with Kull. And when Kull doesn't recoil from it, Brule is happy to talk with him. And then Brule reveals this dark truth to Kull, which is that his home has been invaded by these serpent priests, these people that are half snake, that take the faces of others and wear them in order to infiltrate people's homes and to take them out in order to bend kingdoms to their will. And it's all because of Tulsa Doom, who, if you've seen one of the Conan movies, you'll know. But Tulsa Doom is not actually a Conan villain. He's a Kull villain. So that's pretty interesting. I didn't know that before this. And so Kull and Brule have to fight these serpent priests, these snake priests, and remove them from their place. And so This is a really good story. It has a solid ending, and I really enjoy the introduction of Brule. Brule and Conan are Brule and Kull are like bros, right? They're tight. They're like the best friends, and they have this animosity toward each other that is based on their mutual understanding, mutual like for each other. So I really enjoy that. I really like this, and this is the first time that we learn about the Snake Priest, and it's actually the last time we talk about it up until the Cat and the Skull. So all of the other stories are related. They are, as far as I understand it, chronologically after the Shadow Kingdom because Brule is in them. But I'm not really sure about their order. I don't think they're organized chronologically. So yeah. In the Mirrors of Thusun Thun, Kull is suffering the hour of weariness. So he's tired of life. He's tired of being a king. He doesn't really know what to do with his life. And so when this slave girl shows up, and she leads him to a wizard, Thusun Thun, who has these special mirrors, these kind of like mirrors of desire, kind of like in Harry Potter, that show him things and ideas that he's not really aware of or that he's interested in because they're reflective, but also they show him something different. And so he's kind of absorbed by them. He really enjoys looking at them, and he spends his time looking at them for a long time. And a lot of the situations that happen here is that Kull is actually wondering, am I the real Kull, or is the real Kull the guy across from me in the mirror? And he does this so much that this magic comes over him, and this magic tries to remove his spirit, his soul, his life force from Kull's body. And so this almost succeeds, but Brule shows up in the nick of time to save him. And what's it called? And then Kull kind of learns a little bit about the difficulties of this kind of pondering, right? And so it was good. I like this story. Kull doesn't really murder people in revenge all that much, which I think is interesting. Throughout all of these stories that I'm going to mention, there's people that kind of betray him, but he kind of is understanding of these betrayals in the sense that you're just doing what you think is best for you, and as long as you didn't actually like hurt me, I don't really care. And so he leaves the slave girl alone, but I think he kills Thusun Thun because he actually did something to Kull. So it's kind of interesting. I don't think he's ever forgiven a man. Maybe it's kind of like a misogyny thing. I'm not really sure, but it's kind of interesting. I really enjoyed this story as well. I think the meditation on reality was really, really interesting. I quite like that. And then moving on to the untitled story, Kull's listening to the court happenings. He's bored out of his mind by the stuff that Tu is telling him. Tu being one of his advisors. And this missive arrives, insulting Kull. And he gets angry. And in his cultural beliefs, he has to go to the offender and beat him up himself. He can't send anyone in proxy. And so Kull sets out on this adventure across all of the lands that separate him and this other guy. So they go through several kingdoms. And Kull has this small but meaningful entourage of 300 Red Slayers, which are his guards, and 100 Picts. And so even though they're a small band of 400 people, they are all big savage warriors, and so they're kind of allowed through just about anywhere pretty easily, and are actually received with hospitality quite often because Kull is very good about not letting his men go and do whatever they feel like doing. He kind of keeps them in line quite a bit, and also the guy that's in charge of the Red Slayers is very good at that too. So eventually they make it to this place. And they ride to the end of the world, basically. They have arrived to the edge between this world and the next. And so they're told, ride into the sunrise and you'll never be seen again. No man shall return. They kind of have this thing that's kind of like almost like a mantra that all of the men say to each other and to Kull. And then Kull ultimately decides, hey, this might be, but I have to do this. So he continues on after giving a speech to his men and asking them if they're willing to go with him or if they want to go back and that he won't hold it against them. And all of them, being brave men, decide to set out with him. And so they ride off into the sunrise and they meet this ancient man of the elder race who happens to be a ferryman that takes the people from this land into the next, and he actually happens to be Charon, like the guy from Greek mythology. And he even references this, that, I'm so old, and there will be so many people after you men that eventually my myth will, change, and I'll be someone different. And so Kull and his men all go with Chiron, and that's basically where it ends. And I really enjoyed the story, especially that last little bit at the ending there. I really liked that. I thought that part was great. All of the other stuff, just, Kull riding across countries, it didn't really bother me, but it wasn't really exciting. It was just like, I just like listening to the way that Robert E. Howard narrates the stuff that his characters are doing. So I liked it. And then finally, The Cat and the Skull. Here, Kull is talking with Tu again. He's listening to the court happenings, and he just doesn't care. He's like, all of this stuff is so stupid. Why do you have to make me deal with it? Everyone should be able to deal with it themselves. It's not that difficult, right? And so this woman shows up, and she has a cat that can speak. And so Kull is interested. He finds this cool, or maybe he finds this to be exciting, I guess is the way to put it. And so he goes and talks to the cat, and the cat speaks. It can clearly talk to him. And so he's interested in it. And apparently this cat is an ancient being. It has been around for a long time, and so has gained enough wisdom to talk the language of man. Tu actually is very against this. He's like, dude, there's no way that an animal can learn the speech of humans. It just doesn't happen. Something else is going on. And Kull doesn't listen to him. He's like, dude, I'm into it. We can clearly see that the cat is talking. Let's just let it happen. And so Kull spends a lot of time talking to the cat and listening to it and being interested in what it has to say about the world. And I think this is really interesting because it shows, this is the second time in one of these stories that Kull is brought in by the promise of knowledge, by this interest in learning about, what is beyond what he is doing, right? And so I really enjoy that aspect, but it's kind of interesting that it goes to the point of like being synonymous with like curiosity killed the cat. Like Kull is gonna die one day because he wants to learn something that he doesn't need to learn. And so he talks to this cat, and eventually the cat has gained this trust enough that it tells him, hey, your friend Brule, the Pict, is going to a taboo place. He's going into this lake, and he's going to be attacked soon. And so you have to go for him. And so Kull rushes off to go and find Brule, and he goes into the lake, and he fights sea monsters or lake monsters. And then somehow he gets pulled into this Fey world where he talks to these otherworldly creatures. They're kind of like eldritch beings, but they're also kind of just like Fey. Like they're afraid of metal. And I think they have an issue with fire. I think he mentions both of those weaknesses. And also, it's this place that's like backwards. So like here, light is bright and kind of white or yellow. In this other world, light is dark. It's black. It's like this like UV kind of light, right? And so he goes to them and he speaks to the guy in charge, this Fey guy, and they have this battle of words, of wits, of like back and forth of like, hey, I'm just here for my friend, give him to me and I'll leave you alone. And then the Fey guy is like, no, you came here, it's time for you to die. I know what you men are like, and if you came here, eventually more will follow. And eventually they reach an understanding, they reach a kind of peace. And the Fey guy is like, yeah, your friend didn't come here. There's nothing we can do about it. And Kull also promises to never allow anyone to come in here either. And so he eventually leaves. He's actually helped out of this place so that he can reach where he needs to reach quickly. And he comes back. He confronts the cat. And it turns out that it was all a ploy. It was also actually Tulsa Doom who replaced this wizard guy who was a slave to the girl. And it was a wizard guy that was using a cat by being able to do kind of ventriloquism in order to provide this kind of interest so that the girl could finally get Kull to agree to let her marry her boyfriend, the guy that she wants. But Tulsa Doom actually managed to find a way to turn this into his own benefit. And he kind of shows up and he's kind of like this weird, kind of like Grayskull looking guy. And he's kind of funny. Like, I don't know. He doesn't come off as a very dark character. He comes off as like a stupid character because he's just like, you looked through my ploy. I will leave now and I'll come back and fight you later. the idea is kind of scary. It is kind of crazy that this guy, this skull-faced man, manages to supplant this wizard and then have the same skills of ventriloquism to continue the ploy. But it's such a stupid plan that I just can't take him seriously, right? So it ends up being a ploy of Tools of Doom, and they manage to thwart it. And eventually Kull is like, well, no one got hurt, so there's no big deal. I'm not going to kill anyone. And the girl can marry her boyfriend, whatever, it doesn't matter. And two, of course, is satisfied that he was right all along, and he kind of manages to feel superior to Kull, because Kull is ultimately a barbarian, and Volusians think that they're kind of higher than him, even if he is stronger than them, and so that's why he is king, right? And so overall, I like the story. I really enjoy the setup, and I really found the cat interesting. I kind of understood that it was a ventriloquism thing quite early on, actually, because they mention a guy that has, the wizard guy is actually its servant, and he has something that covers his face. And it also covers up to like mid-neck, and so you can't see any of the muscles necessary for speech. And so clearly there's something up with that. And so I was aware that it was a ventriloquism thing quite quickly. But the reveal was treated very seriously and quite well. I really liked the way this story was. And overall, all of the stories were really enjoyable. I'm still not over my aversion for short stories. I don't love them, because by the time I get invested in them, they're already over. And so it's kind of difficult for me to feel like I want to read any of them. But some of these are actually quite long. They're like 20 or 30 pages. And some of them are actually quite short. However, the other thing that's really interesting is there's a lot of images attached to these. There's a lot of illustrations, which I really like. I really like light novels, which are Japanese pulp novels, and a lot of them have illustrations, usually in the anime style, but some of them do have illustrations similar to the ones that appear here, and I really like them. And I like that this story has this, because it combines, the two things, and also kind of harkens back to the pulp novels or to the pulp magazines where Robert E. Howard's stories first began, where they did have images every once in a while to correlate with these stories. And I really liked that. I thought it was great. So if you're interested in Robert E. Howard's work, definitely check out this Del Rey edition. Check out Michael K. Vaughn's video talking about the Del Rey editions, and join us next month for Sumerian September. I'm going to be reading the first Conan the Barbarian collection, which I have right here. And Michael and his booktuber buddies, which I'm not part of, are also kind of be talking about Conan in September. So if you've never read them or you're interested in rereading them, definitely try that out this next month. So yeah, thank you guys very much for watching, and see you guys later.